Thank you. Yes, thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the Wareham Conservation Commission meeting of Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022. We have, introduce yourselves, please.
Kwame Bardi.
Denise Schultz.
Mike Mercier.
Sandy Slavin.
Carol Melanson.
Nicole Curto.
And I'm Dave Pichette.
And Dave can sit. We stand to recognize Mr. Pichette's last day as our conservation agent and thanking him for his 30 years of service for the town of Wareham. Thank you. I know. 30 years, long time. Think of all the denials and acceptance. And Mr. Slavin, I think you came here to say something. Can you come up to the microphone, please, or Mr. White will have a comment.
On behalf of the Board of Selectmen in the town of Wareham, we want to recognize that 30 years of service is not easy, and thank you very much for it. Being a conservation agent is like being a warranty officer. When people come in with warranty problems, you make some happy, you make some unhappy. It's a job that it's like a gift that just keeps on giving, and I appreciate all the work you've done because it's not an easy job, and we wish you the most success possible with Mass DOT District 5. Again, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good night. Okay, we have no minutes. I have received drafts of these minutes that are listed, and I will be reviewing them for completeness and accuracy for coming meetings. I'm not going to have Mr. Pichette spend his few extra hours editing minutes that I can do. So, first hearing, please.
Did you want to announce the withdrawal,
I will get to it.
just in case somebody's waiting?
We'll
Okay, notice of public hearing pursuant to the provisions of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Wareham Wetlands Protection Bylaw, Division 6. A public hearing will be held in room 320, Wareham Multicultural Center, 48 Marion Road, Wareham, Mass, on Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022, at 6:30 p.m. for the request of determination of applicability for Parkwood Beach Association, James Lupiano Sr., 2 Ash Street, Wareham, Mass. 02571, to remove invasive plant species located on Assessors Map 38, Lot 1002, 0 Parkwood Drive, Wareham, Mass.
Is there anybody here to represent this project? Please come forward and identify yourself. Thank you, Mr. Pichette. We'll read to the project.
So this project site is in the Parkwood Beach area, and the subject area is from the front beach all the way to the Crooked River along that stretch of Parkwood Drive. And the project involves removal of invasive plant species by hand, such as bittersweet, Japanese knotweed, multifloral rose, northern catalpa, things of that nature along that stretch of the road to help protect the desirable vegetation that's there. There are vines and whatnot growing into some of the trees, and they just want to have the ability to be able to remove these things to, again, as I said, protect the desirable vegetation there. All of the work is proposed to be done by hand, and then any removed vegetation would be disposed of at the town brush pile or another appropriate location. So I would recommend the approval of this work with a negative determination number 2.
James, anything to add?
Sorry?
Slavin, I need their names.
Yeah,
for the record?
this is
It's,
James Lapino. You know, this is the outgoing beach committee chairman, Dick Murphy, or Richard Murphy. And incoming is James Rogers, incoming beach committee
okay, so,
So in addition, I don't have anything to add. Dick is, the outgoing committee chairman for the beach, is going to speak to the project. And I'd just like to also acknowledge David's retirement and moving on. I guess it's good for you and bad for us. David's been a great asset for everyone in this town, I think, and for Parkwood Beach especially with ongoing things. So this permit is in the light that we want to be able to pull permits in the certain areas to do the items we've discussed in the past and continue not only with invasive plants, but certain areas and certain projects. So we really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
thank you. Anything to add?
No, it's been pretty well said in the summary, unless there are questions. It's a very limited location. It's not the entire property. It's at the northeast end, where the catalpa trees and the invasive species we're after are. And then there's one place down by Front Beach, the southwest end of the property, in which there's a stand of Japanese knotweed that we want to control.
Those nasty, they are nasty. You give them a chance and they'll grow everywhere. Anything else?
No, ma'am.
Questions on the board? Kwame,
Not at this time, thank you.
Denise,
No questions.
Michael,
No questions, thank you.
Carol,
No questions.
Nicole.
No questions, thank you.
My question is, you're not going to do any vista pruning, are you?
No, I mean,
You're not going to go after those maples and oaks that are growing in between all this invasive?
no, we're just doing the vines on these trees and the ground level invasive species.
Okay,
And it's not vista pruning, because we have vista all along that road.
yes, you do.
It's more maintaining the aesthetics of the park, because it is designated as park by the founder 100 years ago. So that's what we want to maintain aesthetics and
Okay,
appropriate.
thank you. Anybody in the audience would like to speak to this project? Please identify yourself and come forward, please. Could one of you gentlemen give Suzanne the chair? You have to come up to the mic and identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Burke, and I just want to clarify one topic here. The permit is from one end to the other end of that drive, correct, David?
That's correct.
Okay, we just have a little
So
misunderstanding.
it's not the front, that's not the front beach.
No, it goes from the east end of Parkwood Drive to the west end up to the point.
So where it takes a left turn just before the beach, just before the bluff, that's that
Correct.
whole stretch.
Correct.
Parallel
It's that
to the
one
Parkwood.
stretch.
To the
Yeah,
northeast.
it's identified on the site
Yes.
plan that was
So
submitted.
what is identified on the site plan is what we're talking about. I don't know where
Exactly,
Front
that's
Beach
correct.
is.
That's correct, Sandy. I just wanted to identify that for some members that have been calling all day long already. Some feel it's just one small section at the end.
No, it's a long area and a lot of work.
Thank you, that's all I have to
And
say.
it's, the leftovers will go to the town municipal building during their collection of leaves and trees and, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to comment on this project? I'm seeing none.
Motion to close the hearing?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, 600.
Move to accept the project with standard
Well,
-2 determination, work to be done by hand, and all disposal of material is to be done at the town on their brush days. Second.
Second, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstained, 600. Before you start any work, wait for the paperwork from Mr. Pichette. That will be coming, one of his last tasks. Here you go.
We have to frame that signature.
Oh, yeah, we,
You want to give
Got
me
his
those
green cards.
now? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Before we go for the notice of intent We have a hearing for James Saunders, 27 Over Jordan Road, that has been withdrawn. If there's anybody here for that project, we will be withdrawing it, but taking no discussion on it. Okay, next hearing, please.
Okay, notice of public hearing pursuant of the provisions of Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Wareham Wetlands Protection Bylaw, Division 6. A public hearing will be held in Room 320, Wareham Multicultural Center, 48 Marion Road, Wareham, Mass. On Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022, at 6:30 p.m. On the notice of intent for Salvatore A. and Carol Santi Lucito, DAF Engineering, 266 Main Street, Wareham, Mass. 02571, to construct a pier ramp and float located on Assessors Map 51, Lot. Is that 0 or O? Is that O? I'm sorry.
Zero. O10D.
O10D, 8 Grace Lane, Wareham, Mass.
Thank you. Is there anybody here representing that project?
Madam Chair, Bob Rogers with GAF Engineering on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you. Ms. Bichette?
Okay, so this project site is at number 8 Grace Lane, and the project involves the construction of a pier, ramp, and float system with an attached boat lift. And this is in land under the ocean, in land containing shellfish, partially on a coastal beach, and within a coastal flood zone. 210-foot overall length pier, ramp, and float is proposed. This would be 195 feet out from the mean high water line, but the overall length is 210 feet.
Excuse me, can someone shut that door for us, please? Thank you. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
195 feet past mean high tide?
Yes.
Mean low tide, whatever that one was.
Right. Approximately 33 12-inch piles are proposed to construct the structure. Piles would be driven from a floating barge. There's a proposed float that would be 12 by 20 feet in size. There was an eelgrass study done at the site, and there was an indication that there was a patch of eelgrass in the vicinity of the proposed structure, which I'll ask about in a bit. We did receive comments from the Mass Division of Marine Fisheries about this project, and they did note that there is shellfish habitat in the area, and further state that the project would result in the permanent loss of shellfish habitat. They state that the area would likely also be inaccessible to commercial and recreational fisheries. They did also make a comment about the eelgrass, basically to say that barges and boats should avoid anchoring or staging within eelgrass beds during construction and also when not in use. We have not received comments from the harbor master at this point. And relative to the eelgrass issue, I did have a question about what the distance would be to that identified eelgrass area on the eelgrass survey from the proposed pier. We did get a DEP file number for the project, but at this point I would recommend a continuance for the comments from the harbor master and to get some accurate information about the distance from this proposed pier to any eelgrass.
Bob?
Sure. Excuse me. So the eelgrass survey was done by Environmental Conservation and Restoration and Brad Holmes. He had done one at this property a year ago, September, I believe, and then based on the time it took us to get to this point, we sent him back out there. There are pretty good photographs in both reports are included in the notice of intent, and there are some pretty good photographs of that. He describes it as a patch approximately 50 square feet, which would be about a 7-foot square area. So from his location, we didn't see any eelgrass when we did the soundings, and it stands to reason because it's a clump, it's not a bed. But I believe it's in close proximity on the south side of the pier near the proposed boat lift. So, being on the south side of the pier at the end in deeper water, the pier itself isn't going to create any shading impacts to that patch of eelgrass. We could certainly, provide a location on the plan, and, if the commission was of a mind to have us create some greater separation, we do have the ability to shift the end of the pier to the north, closer to the extension of the property line. But the area itself has never been mapped for eelgrass. It doesn't contain eelgrass beds. And as you can see from his report and from the pictures, it seems like there's a friendly clump of seaweed out there that this eelgrass has attached itself to. And it's been there in that spot for at least 2 seasons. And I don't mean to minimize it, but it appears like there's, maybe a couple of dozen, 20 strands of eelgrass. But, should the commission direct us to provide additional separation, we have the ability to move about 20 feet away from that and just certainly make sure that it's not going to, have a piling installed right in the middle of it. I don't have an issue with continuing to provide that information and to get the opinion of the harbor master. The commission in this area, they're all friends, but recently there were 2 piers on properties immediately to the south approved by the commission. I know you have to look at each one individually. And so I guess I'd answer any other questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I noticed that the information provided by the Division of Marine Fisheries was slightly different than what had been provided in those 2 previous docs. Okay, questions, I'll go for Kwame.
No questions, thank you.
Denise.
Not at this time.
Michael.
Just one question. If the project is approved, where would the construction equipment be stored? Be stored during the project itself?
Well, most of the work is going to take place from the barge and would be stored on the barge. There's a little bit of room at the end of Grace Lane. Right now, there's some house construction going on the house opposite Grace Lane on the right. But, I think it's bring in the pilings, as many as you can, that you're going to install right away, and nothing else needs to be done until those pilings are all in, and then, just, sequentially work with the lumber. But I see it as being stored on a barge, out near the end, when it's not under construction.
All right, thank you.
Carol.
No questions at this time.
Nicole.
No questions, thank you.
I am reading the comments from Mass Marine Fisheries. They are concerned about any type of activity over this patch of 7-foot square eelgrass. I would prefer to have that eelgrass marked on the plans for the next meeting, just so I know exactly where it is. I think it's going to be pretty much out there close to that boat lift.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly where we just, anyway, we'll put that on the plan for the next
Because I didn't know
meeting.
whether or not it would be east or west of the boat lift.
Yeah, it's definitely on
If it
the...
was east, to me, that would be a travel lane going in and out of the pier and the boat lift.
Right, I think it falls on the south side. There's still going to be boats sail, motor,
Yeah.
over eelgrass beds all the time, but You know, it is just a very small patch, and it is in deeper water. And so, you know, I think there was a standard at one time that, you know, if you had 2 feet of water above
it.
the top of the eelgrass, there's a presumption, you know, and it's not the float. So, you know, I think we're better where we are right now than if the float was proposed on the south side. But, you know, and I mean, there is active boating going on in that area now. He has a haul line. There are moorings in the area.
I was just surprised to see such a comment several times regarding Save the Eelgrass,
Well,
which I don't normally see.
yeah, I mean, it's never been mapped in this area. It didn't show up on the other properties. It's obviously thriving in this one spot for the density that it is, which isn't much. But in general, in this section of the bay, it's a sandy, silty bottom that is loose and not conducive for you know, actual beds to form and stay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Anybody in the audience would like to comment on this project? I'm seeing none. We're going to be looking for comments from the harbor master.
Move to close the hearing?
No.
Move to
Continue.
move to
No,
continue.
You'll
so
take a
request a
continue.
continuance until November 16th.
Yes.
Move
That
to
would be
continue
yep.
till November 16th?
Yep.
Second.
I have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, abstain. We are continuing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next hearing, please.
Okay, so notice of public hearing pursuant of the provisions of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Wareham Wetlands Protection Bylaw, Division 6. A public hearing will be held in room 320, Wareham Multicultural Center, 48 Marion Road, Wareham, Mass., on Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022, at 6:30 PM, on the notice of intent for John L. Churchill.
We'll go back to, we have to do Saunders, but we'll do Churchill now. Finish with Churchill.
Okay. CEO of JC Engineering, 2854 Cranberry Highway, East Wareham, Mass. 02538, to construct a single-family dwelling and a detached garage located in Assessors Map 129, Lot 1077, and that's located at 2850 Cranberry Highway, Wareham, Mass.
Please identify yourself as representing the project.
Good evening, Brad Bertola with JC Engineering.
Thank you. Mr. Bichette?
Yes, so this project site is at 2850 Cranberry Highway, and the project involves the construction of a single-family dwelling and a detached garage, and this is in the buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetland. 28 by 52-foot dwelling and a 28 by 36-foot detached garage are proposed at the site. The house would be approximately 56 feet from the edge of the wetland, and the garage would be approximately 37 feet from the edge of the wetland. There are some significant grade changes proposed at the site, with as much as 6 feet of fill proposed in the deepest area. So I did have a question about how much fill would be needed to accomplish this project. There's also proposed to be a paved driveway between the house and Cranberry Highway. There's a separate gravel driveway proposed to access the garage, and that driveway would come off of Old Glen Charlie Road. The proposed septic system, leach field, is outside the buffer zone to the wetland. Hay bales and silt fence are proposed between the work and the wetland. We do have a DEP file number for the project. All of the work at the site is outside the 30-foot no activity zone. So I would like to get an answer on the fill amount, but beyond that, I would recommend the issuance of the order of conditions with the standard conditions and the added condition that there be some demarcation of the 30-foot no activity zone line going forward, such as a split rail fence or something of that nature, so that way that line is maintained.
Sorry, Brad, you're,
Yeah. Thank you. I don't actually have a quantity on the amount of fill, but I have at least a reason for it. It's just to allow for the construction of the septic system tank, to provide a gravity system that would allow the tank to basically have enough cover over the system. It will be a microfast alternative septic system due to the local Board of Health regulations. But I don't have a yardage that is going to be required for this. It's a number that I could get to you.
Do you think it's like 200 or like 800, or is it, do you have any rough sense, just from the grade changes?
I'm thinking more in between 400 roughly. Is my ball, just a guess. I mean, I could try to do a quick calculation.
Okay, thank you.
And again, I have no issues with a split rail fence to demarc the line. For some of the members that weren't around, like 5 years ago, we did have a project approved at this site, so we had a hay bale line started. Due to COVID, I think it was extended till earlier this year, but then just kind of lost track of time and expired. So we're back in front of you for this new layout.
okay. There's a lot of fill in the property already.
It was
Piles of
it was
stuff.
Yeah, it was intended to be filled before, so that was part of the original project, so we needed the fill in that location anyways.
So that's part of the fill you'll be using?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, Kwame, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Denise?
Okay, in reference to the fill, there were like huge chunks of cement and asphalt back there. There was like all kind of junk all back in there, not just dirt.
I don't know about asphalt or not,
There
but
was a pile of asphalt there, and there was big chunks of cement, and that's going to be used as the fill?
no, that'd be taken out. Anything unsuitable would be removed from there.
Be removed. And I'm looking at this, and I'm trying to understand, these little rectangles with the 2 dots in them, is that your hay bales?
Yes.
Okay, and we talked about that today. You said you were going to change out the hay bales that
Yeah,
were there?
yeah, because they, for the most part, are all eroded by now, and we had put a secondary set of silt fence and, at the time, straw wattles, just because that was, it was a disturbed site
Right.
at one time. Obviously, the whole site's pretty much Japanese knotweed at the moment, but, again, we'll have to replace that whole silt fence.
And then, yeah, that's what I'm saying, in addition to the hay bales, then you will have the silt
Yeah.
fence.
It's the same location as the original
Has it?
project.
Thank you.
Michael?
Yes, reading over the project, it mentions something about creating a man-made canal, and I see it right here on the project. Is that going to be, is that part of the project? I'm not,
That's the
or
existing,
is that a different project?
That's an existing feature. That's been there.
that's the herring run, yeah.
Yeah, that's been
Oh,
there.
that's, you're referencing the Heron Run already? Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay, because I was a little confused what that was, what that was referencing. Okay, thank you.
Carol?
No questions, thank you.
Nicole?
No questions, thank you.
Not part of this thing, but do you have permission for a curb cut yet?
We haven't filed that yet, no.
Now, is there a reason why that driveway in the front of the house is to be impervious? Or, I can't read the blue.
It's pervious, I mean, it's paved,
Paved.
yeah,
It will be paved.
yeah.
And is there a way of slanting it away from the wetland?
Yeah, I actually spoke to Dave about this, actually, it would have been last week or today. I looked at the grades in the street, and the street grades are higher than the grades just inside the property. And when a curb cut application is applied for, they want to see no water runoff directly into the street. So that's
one of the
Standard
considerations.
stipulation with curb cut permits.
Now, the garage is going to be 36 feet from our no-activity zone? 36?
No.
No, it's 36 feet from the wetland, so you got 6 feet of usable space between the no-activity zone and the building. Can you construct a garage within 6 feet and not disturb the 30?
Of course, yeah, it's over dig. I mean, it's not a,
Okay.
we're not using it for storage back there, so it's not,
So when you dig the dirt out, it won't go toward the wetland?
yeah. It was dug out one time because I had the hay bale line there, so it was all, it was all previously disturbed.
Now, is there a chance you can give us some type of dry wells for the runoff of the garage and the house?
Yeah, that's no problem doing that.
Okay.
We have no issue adding dry wells as a, condition if you want to move forward with this.
Do you want to have the dry wells on the plan, or do you want them included in the standard order of conditions? I'm asking.
That's up to the commission. It's a pretty routine thing, so I would say you could condition it, and we could request a revised plan to be submitted prior to construction, if the commission's okay with that. If you want to see it on the plan first, then, that's okay too.
Is there anybody, I just think that we probably will resolve this hearing tonight. I just didn't want it continued for another 2 weeks. Anybody in the audience want to speak to this project? I'm seeing none.
Motion to close the hearing?
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to
Second.
close the hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. The hearing is closed.
Move to accept the project with the standard order of conditions with the addition of a split rail fence at the no activity zone, removal of all unsuitable material. The grade of the driveway is to be so that there's no runoff into the street, and dry wells are to be added and a revised plan submitted.
Second.
Second.
That's the motion and a second. And Brad, you get it all?
I
She
did.
read it fast.
I'm sorry.
I
Want me to slow down?
I write them down as they come up.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. You got the project. Please wait for the documentation to come before you start the work.
Thank you.
And can we go back to Saunders?
Yes, a notice of a public hearing pursuant to the provisions of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Wareham Wetlands Protection Bylaw, Division 6. A public hearing will be held in Room 320, Wareham Multicultural Center, 48 Marion Road, Wareham, Mass., on Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022, at 6:30 p.m. Notice of intent for James Saunders, GAF Engineering, 266 Main Street, Wareham, Mass. 02571, to construct a pier, ramp, and float located on Assessor's Map 20, Lot 3, 27 Jordan Road, Wareham, Mass.
Thank you. We did receive October 25th a request from Robert Rogers to withdraw the notice of intent for this project. We need to approve the acceptance of that withdrawal.
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. We have officially said thank you and goodbye. All- Next hearing, please.
Okay, hold on for 1 second. Okay, notice of public hearing pursuant of the provisions of the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, General Laws, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Wareham Wetlands Protection Bylaw, Division 6. A public hearing will be held in Room 320, Wareham Multicultural Center, 48 Marion Road, Wareham, Mass., on Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022, at 6:30 p.m. For notice of intent for Robert M. and Jana T. McDuffie, J.C. Engineering, 2854 Cranberry Highway, East Wareham, Mass. 02538, to construct a single-family dwelling and attached garage and in-ground pool located on Assessors Map 81, lots 1006-D2 and 1005-C1, 0 Station Landing, 0 Station Street, Wareham, Mass.
Yes,
Sorry.
please identify yourself as representing this project.
Good evening. Again, Brad Bertolo with JC Engineering.
Thank you, Mr. Bichette.
So again, this site is at 0 Station Street. The site doesn't currently have a new address yet, so they just label it as that address. This notice of intent application is being filed to both address a violation and to propose a single-family dwelling in the buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetland at this location. There were alterations to the site that involved altering vegetation and placing fill in the buffer zone to the wetlands that were done at the site with no approval for this work. There was an enforcement order issued to address the problem, and then, so this notice of intent was submitted to address that violation and also at the same time to propose the construction of a single-family dwelling on this lot. So there was an area where fill was pushed into the 30-foot no-activity zone, and this is to be removed and the area restored according to the buffer zone restoration plan that is part of the site plan. This would involve removing the fill material to the natural slope and then planting that area with low bush blueberry and sweet pepper bush to restabilize that disturbed area. Also, as part of the notice of intent, which is really the bigger activity, is to construct a single-family dwelling, garage, and in-ground pool in the buffer zone to the wetland at this site. A 42 by 65-foot dwelling with attached 24 by 38-foot garage is proposed, and this would be approximately 54 feet from the edge of the wetland. Roof runoff is proposed to be directed into infiltration structures. There's also a 16 by 28-foot in-ground pool and patio with associated retaining wall, and this would be approximately 33 feet from the edge of the wetland. There's several retaining walls proposed on the site, one of which is on the edge of the 30-foot no-activity zone on the south side of the driveway and garage. This would be approximately 2 to 4 feet in height along its length. The proposed driveways are all proposed to be paved. The entrance driveway that comes into the back area drains into some proposed leaching chambers, but the rest of the driveway and the area in front of the garage drains just naturally, and a lot of it would be towards the wetland. So I would recommend some infiltration for this area, as this is a large area of pavement draining towards a fairly steep slope. On this site as well, there are some significant grade changes proposed. As you can see on the plan, there's a lot of different grades being created. I spoke to Mr. Bertolo about this, about recommending that some of these slopes be minimized so that you're not creating new steep slopes on the edge of the 30-foot no-activity zone, as sometimes these are difficult to stabilize. I also asked about whether or not the existing retaining wall that runs along the driveway would be reconstructed or not. Hay bales and silt fence would be installed between the work and the wetland along the 30-foot no-activity zone line as shown. We did get a DEP file number for this project, but at this time I would recommend a continuance to get the plan revisions to show some features to address the runoff from that driveway area towards the wetland to the south.
Brad, your turn.
Thank you. Again, this is similar with the previous project. There was a project proposed at one time and approved, which included the driveway leading to the back, as well as that retaining wall. I spoke with the applicant today, and he has no intentions of changing any of that wall at the moment. It's been there for, my guess is around 15 years. We permitted this in 2005. So it was built soon after that. The site itself, was cleared. Some of the stockpiles did encroach into the buffer zone areas, so we did propose a mitigation plan, which does include some maple trees as well as the low bush blueberry and sweet pepper bush. The grading on here, because of the fill and excavations, that's basically a topography of today's grade. So that's the reason why there's some larger cuts and fills, just because of the amount of stockpiles that are being removed. For the most part, the site is going to be somewhat leveled. We have roughly maybe a 2-foot elevation change difference from north to south. We do have a walkout basement on the north side of the property where we are providing or proposing a couple feet of fill, 2 to 3 feet of fill close to the out and then out off the house, and then tapering down to the hay bale line. Typical 3-to-1 slopes are proposed for grass. I don't anticipate a heavy amount of runoff or quick runoff coming off that flat back portion of the house, which is the northwestern side of the house. Again, we are proposing some retaining walls, as David said, along the 30-foot. That'll hold back some fill, or the grading that's proposed above it. Again, minor, they're 2 to 4 foot tall. They'll actually act as a nice fixed buffer zone, so there's no work beyond that, similar to what, a split rail fence would do, but we have a retaining wall. In regards to the driveway, yes, about 50% of the driveway length or so is being captured by surface water runoff drainage structures that are indicated kind of in the middle of the pavement. I did show proposed grades on the site. A portion of the driveway, as you head up to the top where it splits, everything to the right and the loop around the front of the house, for the most part, drains towards the northwest. Everything that's leading to the side entrance garage, that is pitched, I guess, southwest. I spoke with a client. He has no issues putting Cape Cod berms or some type of berm to prevent that. Doing so would have to direct and add some infiltration areas, or maybe a strip of crushed stone along the edge of the driveway so that it kind of captures and filters any surface water runoff off of that driveway. I think the one that's closest to or leading to the garage is probably the more concerning one, as that's within the 100-foot buffer zone and draining towards the wetlands. The loop along the front, for the most part, drains across the front yard, which is a portion of it's outside the 100-foot, and then eventually it would follow natural grades that are out there today, kind of keeping the same patterns. Everything kind of drains to the northwest currently in the front of the house, and that's what we're maintaining. If the commission wants to continue to see that revised drainage, that's fine. If it's something that can be conditioned with a revised plan, just adding some type of strip of infiltration areas, or even another subsurface area. There is area on the property outside the 30-foot that we could add something to capture more surface water runoff. Again, we do have roof runoff, or roof dry wells around the whole structure. I have details on the plan that basically follows the roof pattern on the set of architectural plans, so I've added lines to each anticipated gutter location. That's it. I'll turn it back to you guys.
Thank you. Questions, Kwame?
So, when I went there, excuse me, it was like, it was marshes on like, on I think the northwest side, like you would say, like when you enter, it was facing the north side, right? Or was it?
What is?
The marsh Like it drops down and is like all kind of marshy?
It drops, I guess, on three sides of this. It's kind of
Right.
on a...
Yeah, it's
like
kind
a
of like in a-
peninsula that
yeah.
sticks out, and it has, yes.
So like, how much, you said you're gonna have to bring in like fill, obviously, right?
I don't think
Or
we
you
have
just
to
gonna-
bring in much, because we're going to be lowering the areas of stockpile that's there. Although if that fill is unsuitable, it's going to have to come out and come back in. And, you know, in the location of the house, the grade on the low side where the walkout is approximately where it is today. And they're going to cut into the bank, which is going to produce a lot of fill. Everything that comes out of the footprint of the foundation. And then there is where the garage is being lowered by, see, the highest is about elevation 30. For the most part, it's 27. So that's a drop of 1 to 3 feet. And then over by the septic system, which again is outside jurisdiction, but in that area, we're cutting into the current slope that's there today. So I don't see there being a lot of fill brought on site. It's kind of just moving it around on the site.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Denise?
Is there a reason why this whole thing like isn't shifted over away from the BVW? Why everything is like so shoved down into the area really close to the wetlands? Why doesn't it, I mean, they've got this big loopy driveway. What's the story?
It's just
That's just what
the
they want, this
layout,
big loopy
the
driveway?
layout they wanted. They wanted to build on the knoll there, that kind of natural peninsula that's sticking out, so.
Okay. And then they're putting pavers around the pool. And then there's gonna, and this orange with the slashes running through it, that's a wall?
Everything orange is in retaining walls.
It's a retaining wall.
So there's 4 of them.
Either side of the house, up around the septic system, but again, that's outside jurisdiction. And then just a one off the foundation
I was just
front wall.
making sure I was looking at the right orange things.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yep, yeah, correct. So there's four locations where there's...
What are these steps? Where are they going? The ones by the patio, by the pool?
Where are they going?
Yeah, where?
They're leading from the pool backyard, I guess, pool deck area down to the walkout basement. We're using the current topography of the property to create a walkout on one side, and,
Okay.
you know, the basement's getting
So you got-
dug into the slope.
To the slope. Okay. Thank you.
Michael?
Not this time, thank you.
Carol?
No questions, thank you.
Nicole?
No questions, thank you.
I have nothing. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak to this project? We are going to ask for continuance for a better definition of the handling of the surface runoff of the driveway, including Cape Cod berms, maybe to redirect the water. Is that my understanding? So we do want another set of plans showing
That's
handling the
perfectly fine.
runoffs.
Okay.
Motion to continue the hearing till 11:06? I mean, 11:16?
Yes. Second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are continued to 11:16. Thank you.
Thank you again.
The next hearing we have is Matthew and Cindy Rhodes. Is there anybody here representing that project? Please identify yourself.
Good evening, Brian Wallace with JC Engineering.
Thank you. this isn't, is this new? No. This is
No.
old. Okay. Up here's one from the previous hearing. Okay, you're up.
All right. Okay, so this project location is at 72A Burgess Point Road, and the project involves replacing pilings and extending the float of an existing pier this is in land under the ocean and land containing shellfish. It's proposed to replace 2 pilings holding the existing float and then adding 2 additional pilings to the end of what would be the new float to end up with 4 pilings, 1 at each corner of the float. And it's also proposed to increase the size of the float from 160 square feet to 300 square feet. The new float would be approximately 17 feet further out into the water from its current location. An eelgrass study was conducted, and there is eelgrass in the area, and at the last meeting, we had a little bit of a discrepancy in terms of how the language in the eelgrass survey and the plan coincided. I did end up speaking to the consultant who did the eelgrass survey, and we went over the information. And after looking at some additional information, the eelgrass line that the consultant marked is the same as what's shown on the engineer's plan. So that distance that is shown is correct and accurate. So the work is going to be outside the 50 feet to the eelgrass bed. There was also some activities that were happening down at the coastal bank along the edge of the water near this existing pier that we had discussed in terms of some seaweed that had been piled up, some limbs that had been trimmed and whatnot. So again, we discussed that with the consultant who talked to the owner about that. And so they obviously will not continue any of those types of activities. I do think they are going to have to remove a couple things that they've placed down in there that shouldn't be in there in terms of some piles of pretty large piles of seaweed and whatnot that really shouldn't have been piled up into the coastal bank like that. But beyond that, as far as the project itself, we did get a DEP file number for the project. And at this point, I would recommend the approval of the project with the standard conditions and then the added conditions that the materials that were placed down along the coastal bank be removed, and that there be no further trimming or cutting of the vegetation or trees down within that 30-foot no-activity zone.
I'm writing as fast as I can. Thank you. Brian, anything to add?
Nope, I don't really have anything to add. I think Dave summarized what we need to do quite well. So, Dad, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Kwame, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Denise?
Tell me again, the change in the float, it's going from what size to what size?
It's going from an 8x20 to an 8x37.5.
160 to 300.
160
Square feet.
square feet. Thank you.
Which is the limit we allow.
Everybody goes to the limit. That was my only question, since we got the eelgrass debate straightened out.
Michael?
No questions, thank you.
Carol?
No questions, thank you.
Nicole?
No questions, thank you.
Should we, the storing of the seaweed that will have to be removed and the alterations that were done within the 30-foot, does the commission want to issue a fine
Yes.
Okay. Is there a, that was just my statement. We'll make sure that we'll include that in the the finalization of the hearing. Anybody in the audience would like to speak to or for this project? I see none.
Move to close the hearing?
We have a
Second.
motion and a second to close the hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain.
I don't want to do it.
Okay.
You know how I feel
Let's
about
see.
dogs. Okay, we're going to do a move to accept the project with the standard order of conditions, the stipulation that the materials at the shoreline are to be removed and any alterations are to cease. And what are we going to do about the alterations? How, do they have to return that to what it previously was, or?
I think it will grow back.
There was a couple, there was some branches trimmed off a tree, so you're really not gonna be able to do much about
And a
that.
little land clearing for the benches and stuff like that. I think that
Okay.
will grow back on
Yeah.
its own.
But they're not going to remove like all the other trees that are down there?
No.
All that other stuff?
We just said no further
No further
cutting or
alterations.
removal alterations within the 30-foot, no work. Now, the fine.
Fine of, is this one of our $300 ones?
I would say it's not something we would have approved, so therefore that fits into that category.
With a $300 fine?
Understood.
That be the motion.
Second?
I have a second. All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain. Completed. Just make sure nothing gets done until you get the documentation from Dave, okay?
Will do. Thank you for your time.
You,
Don't like dogs.
The agenda has VOBM on it, but that was asked to be continued until December 7th.
no,
No?
not that one. No, that one,
No.
that one
No.
was the one that we had closed, and we were gonna just make a decision on it tonight. That was the Onset Bay Marina.
Onset Bay Marina?
Oh, I didn't pull that one. Okay, that's right. We were waiting for a decision. Sorry, wrong notes. We were waiting for a clarification as to the limit of notification of abutters for this particular project. Correct?
Correct.
That is correct.
We closed the hearing. So there was some discussion with Mr. Bowen regarding it. And Dave, can you summarize?
Yes, so there was a question as to the extent of what abutters would need to be notified in terms of this particular project. This discussion was had with the town's attorney, and that far lot, because it is separated by the paper street, his determination was because the project was not on that lot, then that was not the lot where the 100-foot had to be measured from. So the people on the far side of that particular lot would not have to technically be notified for this particular hearing. So with that, it appears that the abutters that were notified on the second round were correct. And so I would say at this point, the commission could grant the order of conditions to reconstruct the bulkhead and the boat racks as proposed and as we had actually previously approved on the previous hearing that we had. There were also some other issues beyond what's proposed that were discussed at the meeting, and the commission is going to look at that separately as potential enforcement to deal with those other matters that were discussed at that meeting. But at this point, I would recommend the issuance of the order of conditions for the reconstruction of the bulkhead and the boat racks. We do have a DEP number for that. And let me just go over. The conditions were to also include the stormwater structures that were requested and put in the most revised set of plans that were submitted to us. So that would be the added condition.
Their hearing has been closed, so there's no discussion on it, so,
Move to accept the project with the, per the revised plans.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. The next one I have is Connor Cormier, Atlantic Coast Engineering, 33 Prospect Street. Is there somebody here representing that project?
If there is.
Nobody here?
This was to remove and replace a retaining wall. Anybody here for that project?
He said that he may be running late, but if he wasn't here to table it, and we would take it up later on in the meeting.
Okay, I'll take a motion to table.
Move to table until,
No, I'll just make a motion to table.
just a motion to table.
And a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, we tabled. We're up against to Wareham MA3 LLC. Is there anybody here representing that project? Thank you.
Madam Chairperson, for the record, Joe Shanahan, on behalf of the applicant, Wareham MA3 LLC. Also with me this evening is Seth Taylor, a project manager for Goddard Consulting, wetland scientist firm.
Good evening.
Good evening. Okay, someplace in here. I'm going to need your name again.
It's Seth Taylor.
SETHTAYLOR. And it's Goddard, Goddard Consulting. Thank you.
Okay. Dave, you're up.
Yes, so as we are well aware, this project site is at 91 and 101 Faring Hill Road, and the project involves the construction of a commercial solar array in the buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetland. Approximately 20 acres of wooded land would be cleared to construct the solar project with battery storage component. And as I said, some of the work is within the buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetland. As I had stated, I'll go through my comments on this project. In my opinion, after reviewing the information, as was read at the last meeting, I believe the project would have an adverse impact on the downstream wetlands. The hydro study that was done really wasn't designed or intended to address potential impacts to that part of the site, but more to the existing homes that are in the neighborhood of where this project would be. So clear-cutting 20 acres on this property would, in my opinion, result in degradation of water quality treatment compared to what currently exists. And again, this is something that Mr. Price actually acknowledged at a previous meeting. In any level of degradation to water quality going into the wetland would be considered an alteration under the town wetland bylaw. On the wetland side, or the east side of the site, the project would direct stormwater runoff that currently runs broadly over the entire hillside, thereby dispersing the water generally over the area, and then direct it into a stormwater detention basin which overflows and would create 2 specific discharge points. So again, in my opinion, that is going to result in some change to the current water flow and would have an impact on the downstream wetland, whether it be to limit the amount of water that goes to that area in drier times or potentially channelize stormwater runoff into these two new locations, which could change the normal flow of water down the hill, resulting in increased velocity of stormwater down gradient to the discharge points and to the stream that emanates from the wetlands. Even as things currently are, this stream does overflow its banks during spring when water levels are high and also in certain large rain events. Clear-cutting the upgradient land of trees which serve to take up certain volume of water and to dissipate the velocity of runoff would exaggerate the problem and result in damage to the downstream wetland. Again, this is town-owned conservation property. Clear-cutting of the forests would also leave the exposed edge of the remaining forest more susceptible to wind damage, as we've seen that forests tend to buffer themselves, and if you clear out a section, that tends to leave the edge trees subject to further damage or more easily damaged. Again, the project would be surrounded by the perimeter chain link fence, which would create a barrier to wildlife and fragment the existing wildlife corridors that currently exist in the area. I've said this previously and I'll say it again. I think the applicant has worked hard to make improvements to the project over the course of time and to try to come up with the best project that could be compiled in this particular area. It's just, in my opinion, it's just not a suitable site for this type of a project. I think there's a lot of features that are adverse to a project of this nature in the area. Being on a sloped area, having soils that are not well drained, being close to wetlands or in proximity to wetlands and town-owned conservation land, and also not, though it's not necessarily a wetland issue, in a residential zoned neighborhood. So again, in my opinion, based on the information submitted, this project would result in the alteration of the bordering vegetated wetland and the town-owned Faring Hill Conservation Area, and for these reasons, and for the reasons I stated previously. Alterations to wetlands should not be approved. The commission should focus on preventing alterations to wetland and on protecting the town-owned Faring Hill Conservation property and just wetland resource areas in general, because once forested land is clear-cut, it's not going to come back anytime soon. The other thing is the commission has to look into impacts that would occur over a long period of time and not just resulting in the construction itself. Some of these issues may not be realized or recognized immediately, but again, in my opinion, I do think there is going to be problems if this is permitted. So I did previously recommend and would again that the project should not be approved based on the town bylaw, which states that the project should not result in the alteration of wetland resource areas and the protected interests of the bylaw, and that the commission has the authority to deny projects based on the unacceptable cumulative impacts to wetland resource areas and their protected interests. So that's my viewpoint on the site and the project, and we can open it up to further discussion.
Comments?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the Commission, Mr. Pichette, and members of the public. I'd like to begin by thanking the Commission for allowing us time to review and respond to the agent's report that was read into the record at the meeting on October 5. To be frank, I felt blindsided by the report that evening and was certainly not prepared to respond at that time. And I believe I had good reason to be surprised. Mr. Pichette and the Commission have continued this public hearing many times over many months, stating publicly, time and time again, that you were waiting for the final project plans, which were working their way through the planning board review process, and the town's consulting engineer's final comments on those plans. And even the agent's report itself states, and I quote, "This project has been awaiting final project plans and final comments from the town's consulting engineer," close quote. Now, despite those pronouncements, for some reason, out of the blue, the agent's report, which was reiterated again tonight, was issued on October 4th. That was 2 weeks before the final project plans were even submitted to the town and before the town's consulting engineer's final comments were made available. In fact, Mr. Rowley's final comments are still not available. I ask that the commission be mindful of that fact in considering the report, as I am sure the DEP and the Superior Court will be mindful if an appeal of this matter becomes necessary. Aside from the report having been issued prematurely, because neither Mr. Pichette nor the commission waited for either of the two prerequisites that they said they needed for 5 months, I would suggest that much of its content is made up of matters of personal opinion, characterization, and preference rather than fact, and more importantly, matters which are not properly before this commission under either the State Wetlands Protection Act or the local Wetland Protective Bylaw. I ask your patience as I walk through some of those matters to substantiate my point. Mr. Pichette made statements at commission meetings long before his report issued that he did not support the cutting of trees at this site to develop a solar project. He carried that personal opinion over to the report by characterizing the tree cutting, as he did again tonight, and I quote, "The site will be clear-cut," unquote. And then further along, quote, "clear-cutting 20-plus acres on this property," close quote. The fact is that the tree removal is proposed for 18 acres, not 20-plus acres, and it does not constitute what he terms clear-cutting. This is a 44-acre property from which 18 acres, or only 40% of the trees, would be removed. This does not constitute clear-cutting. In addition, the local zoning bylaws anticipated such tree removal for the development of solar projects, which is the reason for the design standards in Section 594, which require the maintenance of vegetative buffers around the entire perimeter of such projects. This project complies with those design standards and actually exceeds the design standards in certain locations. Further again, with regard to tree removal, Mr. Pichette goes on to opine that, quote, "Once the forest is cut, it is gone forever," close quote. Again, the 44-acre forest is not being clear-cut for this 18-acre project, and that 18-acre area will not be, quote, "gone forever," unquote. Unlike a gravel or a mining operation or even a residential subdivision with which you are familiar, at the end of the life of a solar project, the project is decommissioned with the equipment removed and the site restored. And your local planning board is requiring a financial surety in the amount of $232,000 to ensure that happens. In addition, Mr. Riley has required that our decommissioning plan include the planting of trees at the site as part of its restoration. We have also committed nearly $20,000 to the planning board in mitigation for the tree removal, and we have proposed to this commission to pay into a tree mitigation bank so that replacement trees can be planted at other locations in town. Finally, and again with regard to the tree removal, Mr. Pichette offers the unsubstantiated opinion, which you heard again tonight, and I quote, "Clear-cutting will also leave the exposed edge of the remaining forest more susceptible to wind damage, as wind buffering capacity of the forest as a whole will be compromised," unquote. We disagree and assert the creation of edge habitat does not have a negative impact on wind buffering capacity. Edge habitat is a common occurrence in nature and normal to your typical landscape. As an example, an edge of forest along even an agricultural field does not mean that the forest beyond this edge has significantly more impact from wind damage to the interior of the forest than the edge. By the way, and very important, with all that is included in the agent's report about the removal of trees for this project, and the time I have just taken to contest all of his assertions, the proposed tree removal for this project is not properly before this commission under either the State Wetlands Protection Act or the local protective bylaw. In fact, the Wetlands Protection Act indicates that activities outside the buffer zone are so unlikely to result in alteration of wetlands that pre-construction review of them is not required. And the vast majority of this project, all but 4,000 square feet, or over 98% of the project, is outside the buffer zone. The DEP doesn't even think that deserves review. In this report, Mr. Pichette also sets forth the opinion, again without any exposition, that, quote, "The project will be surrounded by a perimeter chain link fence which will create a barrier to wildlife and fragment the existing wildlife corridors," excuse me, "that currently exist in the area," close quote. Certainly, there will be a fence, as required by the National Electrical Code and plain common sense, but it will have very little impact, if at all, on the wildlife or the corridors. First, only 18 of the 44 acres at this site will be fenced. And there is a huge town conservation land immediately adjacent to the site. Further, the fence will be installed with a 6-inch gap between the ground and the bottom of the fence, as all of our projects are. This will allow all but the largest species of wildlife to move through the site, the only exceptions being white-tailed deer and black bear, and these animals cover more range than the smaller species and will move around the fence with ease. And again, while the concern for wildlife expressed in the report is unfounded, it is also not within the purview of this commission under either the State Wetlands Protection Act or the local wetland protective bylaw. Mr. Pichette also offers the opinion in the report that this project is, quote, "poorly cited," close quote. And then the even more broad opinion that, and I quote, "No matter how much you try to improve upon a poorly cited project, it is still a very poorly cited project," close quote. The citing of unwanted projects almost always results in conflict between developers and some in the community, and I am very much accustomed to it. But it is not the role of the conservation agent to render such a verdict. This site is zoned by the town of Wareham to allow such solar projects, so it is an allowed use. Admittedly, it has been a challenging site to work and a lengthy process. But working with the town's planning board, Mr. Rowley, its consulting engineer, and Horsley Witten, the town's consulting hydrogeologist, for well over a year, and having addressed all of their comments and incorporated all of their recommendations, none of which, by the way, were reviewed and included in Mr. Pichette's review or report, because it was done before they were available. We have addressed all of their comments, we have incorporated all of their recommendations, and we have a project that complies with all Planning Board and Conservation Commission requirements. It works, and it will continue to work because of the conditions, the monitoring program, and the financial guarantees that will be in place for the life of the project. One final comment in the report that I would like to address before introducing our wetland scientist is Mr. Pichette's gratuitous statement that, and I quote, "The fact that an insurance policy is being required to pay for impacts to surrounding homes, should they occur, is disconcerting," close quote. Aside from the fact that this comment is still another matter that is not within the purview of the commission, it is simply not true. Con Edison insures, as you would expect, all of its projects, no matter where they may be. And when the planning board asked me if there would be insurance on this project, I answered yes, and provided them with a copy of our certificate of insurance for this particular project. It was not required, it was volunteered. To suggest that because we have insurance on the project, there is a problem with the project is like me saying to you, because you have car insurance, there is a problem with your driving. This is just a blatant non sequitur. All of this having been said, I would now like to introduce Seth Taylor to address and contest certain matters contained in the agent's report, which are, in fact, properly before the commission for its consideration. Those are the possible alteration of or impacts to the wetland resource areas for this project. Mr. Taylor holds a master's degree in energy and environmental management and is a senior project manager at Goddard Consulting, an environmental firm that has been before this commission previously. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to introduce Mr. Taylor.
Hello, everyone. Again, Seth Taylor. One of the key points that I wanted to address was about water quality entering the vegetated wetland. Although only about 4,000 square feet of buffer zone is being cut as part of this project, we do recognize that the cutting of upland forest can change the regime of water flow that would enter a receiving body downstream. Several steps have been taken to mitigate that. First, the project 100% complies with the Massachusetts stormwater standards, which require a SWIP preparation, an EPA SWIP, for implementation prior to construction, during construction, and a closeout before the commission after construction. There must be no reduction in stormwater quality. It must recharge groundwater, and runoff quality must not impair receiving waters. At the site, the soils are composed of Montauk fine sandy loam, very stony. This is glacial till. This is primarily sands and gravels. It could be to a depth of 65 inches to bedrock. And that was taken into consideration in the stormwater design. As the forested areas are turned into grassland, water will still fall upon the same acreage of land and will infiltrate first before sheet flowing downhill. It will then, by design, hit a berm and go to 2 detention basins, which were intentionally unlined detention basins, which will both sit upon the 65 inches or so of fine sandy loam with a 10% stone inclusion, and will infiltrate into the groundwater along with the waters that have been received in the grasses themselves and flow within or under the ground, within the groundwater, and until the vegetated wetland through groundwater recharge. And the detention basins are also, by design, designed to the 100-year storm event. And only at that point would those detention basins overflow. And again, by design, per the Massachusetts stormwater standards, when that's overflown in buffer zone only, in the 4,000 square feet, they are dissipated into sheet flow as to prevent a new point source discharge, such as a catch basin would do on a road. It would intentionally not do that, but fan out the water as it goes and enters the BVW down gradient. The water will still enter the wetland and move across it as the wetland is there because of its impermeable surfaces, impermeable, impenetrable surface under the soils where it'll move through the wetland. So we suggest that there will not be a degradation to water quality that is entering the vegetated wetland, which is the basis for the recommendation upon this aspect, that alterations to protected wetlands is a way in which a commission, this commission can, under the bylaw, can reject a project. So based upon that, We suggest that there will not be an impairment to water quality entering the vegetated wetland, and will not impact either, in that same way, the Fearing Hill Conservation land down gradient. And with that, that is all they like to cover on that. Thank you.
May I make a couple?
Wow. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to start by making a comment regarding the timing of my report at the October 5th meeting, because, that's been brought up a couple times. So when that meeting was approaching, I knew I was going to be away that week, and there was no request for a continuance of that hearing. So for some reason, the applicant, even though certain pieces of information weren't apparently ready, that hearing was still going to be discussed. So knowing that I wasn't going to be there and knowing that there might be some interest to try to close the hearing, that's why I submitted my comments at that time. So I understand Mr. Shanahan's concern with my not getting the other information before making those comments. But I just wanted to explain the reason why they were submitted. My comments wouldn't have changed because based on the information now that I have seen it, there really wasn't anything in there that would have caused me to change my opinion anyway. So
May
I just wanted to,
No,
let me just continue on. So I just wanted to make that statement on that particular issue. And I did also want to ask the consultant, you did talk about the water quality, which I can appreciate, but what's your thoughts on the issue with regards to the changes in the patterns of flow and the potential impacts of, let's say, velocity and new channels, which are going to create sort of a different water flow regime within that area, and how that could potentially impact the stream downstream? Because as I said, currently everything sheet flows off the entire site in a sort of manner that's been going on for decades. Now that's all going to be altered, and one of my concerns is with regards to what's going to happen or what impacts potentially could happen if that's all now channelized into two new areas, which aren't used to having the water flow in that particular zone, and how that could potentially impact the downstream wetlands.
Right, so what I'd say is that the BVW will still be receiving the same amount of water. It will
I don't question that.
You don't question that, right. So it'll be receiving still the clean water, per the design. It will enter the BVW in different areas, but again, I mean, the reason why there's wetlands in particular areas is because there's, poorly drained soils, essentially, is what causes it. So the water can't get through. And so as the water is entering the wetland, it's still flowing throughout the wetland in the same way. I mean, maybe it's going to change how it enters a little bit, but this isn't a 50,000 acre wetland complex and whatever. It's a small wetland where the flow shouldn't change the hydrology within the wetland, and it shouldn't change the vegetative composition of the wetland, and the water, because the flow will remain the same, entering will still exit in the same volume as it enters the stream, which is in part supplied by the hydrology from the wetland, from the hills behind it. So I don't think that there will be a discernible difference, because the hydrology will the volumetric, the volume of the hydrology will remain the same, and it will still have, poorly drained soils, so that it will still move through the wetland in the same way. Could it channelize differently inside of the wetland? It could, but does that change the quality of the wetland? No. It's not changing the type of wetland. You're not removing water from the wetland. It's small enough that it's still going to receive the same volume, and it should move through it. So I really don't think that impact to the wetland will, and the downstream stream will change, its makeup either.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of what one of the main issues is the timing of water flow versus what currently exists and what potentially is going to exist down the road, and the rate of how that moves through the area. Because if it is limited, if it is sort of dammed up by the detention basins to some degree, that could create changes to the wetland long-term. You know, this is part of the issue that we are looking at. And if you have a large storm event, which is beyond the 100-year storm event, which we have those more frequently than ever these days, you could have much larger volumes of water channelizing into specific points, which you don't currently have. So I don't expect you folks to agree with my viewpoint, and that's totally okay. I'm just expressing what my viewpoint is and what the reasons are. So I'll leave the questions up to the commission beyond
Okay,
that.
thank you.
Madam Chairperson, may we further address Mr. Pachette's question through my engineer?
Regarding, I thought
The
Seth
discharge from the basin?
answered the question.
I'd like to supplement based on Mr. Pachette's response.
All right,
Again, Rich Tabazinski with Atlantic Design Engineers. I just wanted to clarify a few items as part of the stormwater design of the basins. There are two basins on that side of the property. They have discharge points come at where the stormwater will exit those basins. But those discharge points will be going into level spreaders that total 150 feet in their length. So it's not like you're going to have a small pipe discharging into one specific 2 or 3 foot area and creating a stream going down towards the wetlands for all the water exiting the site. It's going to be going into level spreaders that total a length of 150 feet. And those level spreaders are 150 to 200 feet away from the wetlands. So once the water exits those level spreaders, there's still 150 feet or 200 feet in one instance before it actually reaches the wetlands. So the discharge points from the basins are quite a ways from the edge of the wetland area. There's a lot of natural buffer that will dissipate any type of point source discharge if you're thinking of it in that way. It'll allow the water to spread out before it reaches the wetlands. So I just wanted to clarify how those discharge points are for the basins.
okay.
Madam
Thank you.
Chairperson, one more.
Yeah, okay.
Do my questions or comments
I'm just-
exacerbate the chair?
I'm just trying to move on and ask some questions from our board who might give you more questions that you could answer a little bit later, but okay, ask.
My question is with regard to Mr. Pachette's explanation of the timing of the October 4th report.
I don't think you need to add, that was his explanation. He said he gave his report when he read the October 31st and October 17th report. It didn't change his opinion.
Madam Chairperson, if I may, this commission and Mr. Pachette, for well over 5 months, continued this public hearing and told me and the public that they wanted final plans for this project after it had been reviewed by the planning board and final comments from Mr. Rowley, the town's consulting engineer. Mr. Pachette's report didn't review the final plans, and you still don't have Mr. Rowley's final comments, unless you got it
that what
late
this
this
is?
afternoon.
I believe Mr. Rowley gave us the report on October
October
31st, 22.
That is not his
Okay,
final comments.
If I can go back, 7/7/21, 7/21/21, 8/4/21, 8/18/21, no discussion continued, 9/15/21, 10/6/21, 10/20/21, we did have a hearing. 11/3, 11/17. It was not all for this report way back then. There are times in which no one showed up to represent the project. We also have requests for continuances.
That never happened, Madam Chairperson. Go ahead.
All right, I have the views that no one showed up for all these. I can continue. You can see it's a long list of all the hearings we had, of which we
I
had to
don't
continue.
want this to become
But I'm just gonna
adversarial,
say-
Madam Chairperson.
Sorry, no comments, please. So I'm going to start asking my fellow commissioners if they have any questions. Kwame?
It's just a slight concern. I mean, I'm not a scientist, and I know you guys have, provided all the proper information and tools and all this. There's a lot going on. The public's
Indeed.
been here, for a while. I just have a slight concern about the water runoff once the land is altered, and also the impact it will have with the wetlands. And it's just a concern. It's more than a concern. So that's all I have to say.
Denise?
All right, I've been doing a lot of research, so you're going to have to bear with me as I go through different things. My understanding, when I look at the Department of Environmental Protection, Wetlands Protection Act, it speaks to the Section 10.55 speaks to the altering of bordering vegetative wetlands. This project will have an impact and therefore alter the bordering vegetative wetlands, which then impacts our wetland, and then which impacts the Wewianick. The hydrologist, when we asked him, stated that there would be an impact and that his report was more directed to the impacts on the neighboring households. So I think under the Wetland Protection Act, the alterations just aren't now acceptable. Mr. Raleigh did state in his October 31st letter or whatever to the chairman that the clearing of the site, even if done in phases, as worked out, shown on the plans, will have an adverse effect on the remaining vegetation. White pines especially are subject to damage with wind and rain when exposed within the existing stand. If I move to our bylaws, let me see where I am in here. Previous page. Our bylaws, section 7.2, and I can read it to you if you want me to. Page is that on? 7.2. The commission is empowered to deny a permit for failure to meet requirements of this bylaw, for failure to submit necessary information plans requested by the commission. That did not happen. That was fine. The failure to meet design specifications, performance standards, for failure to avoid or prevent unacceptable, significant, or cumulative effects upon the resource area values protected by this bylaw, and where no conditions are adequate to protect those values. The commission, the water flowing from when you take out these trees and you put in these things is an alteration. It changes the pre-existing drainage characteristics. If we move into section, where is it? Hold on. Section 3 of definitions, changing of pre-existing drainage characteristics, flushing characteristics, salinity distribution, sediment patterns, flow patterns, or flood retention characteristics. Number 6 talks about driving of piles, erection or repair of buildings or structures of any kind. Destruction of plant life is in number 8, including cutting of trees. In section number 11, it says the incremental activities which have or may have a cumulative adverse impact on the resource areas protected by this law. The water flowing will change, and it'll have an effect on the wetland, and I think that the commission can deny this project both under the Wetlands Protection Act and by our local bylaws. And I think that's everything that I've dug up on this whole thing. It just, you're going to change things, and not to the better. And I think that the project, I agree with Mr. Pichette that the project should be denied.
Okay, Michael?
All right. Just to follow up just on what Mr. Pichette and Denise said as well. Look, I get tensions are high, and a lot of work has been done on this project, okay? I understand that, I get it. But at the same time, when you start altering things and doing a lot of different fancy things here and there and there, and doing a lot of different things, as Denise just said, there's gonna be a lot of alterations to things. What's gonna happen? Well, what could happen is, you're gonna have, maybe sometimes you're just better off leaving things just the way they are. Because in the end, heaven forbid, if there's ever a major catastrophe, or sometimes you're better off just leaving things alone, just leaving things just the way they are. Because the project is proposed just to be right next to the wetland, and, well, who knows? So, as I said before, I was probably just gonna propose to vote no and move on, and I'm still sticking with that today. So, I'm still staying with that, so, thank you. Denise, I'm sorry, Sandy.
Carol?
I don't think I need to add any further comments.
Nicole?
I agree with Carol. I think I'm good.
The fence, maybe I'm misreading the plan, but isn't part of the fence within the 100-foot buffer zone?
No.
I'm looking under sheet 6. I'm not, and I see tree clearing within the 100-foot buffer zone. But then maybe I'm misreading the plan.
There is tree clearing in the buffer zone.
There is some tree clearing in the buffer zone. And I think I'm looking at 6, it shows me piece of the fence within the 100-foot. Here's a question for you, Mr. Shanahan. If there's only 4,000 square feet in the wetland, why didn't you move the project out of consideration of conservation?
We'll be back.
Just think how much we would have saved if you had done it to begin with. But that's, my other comment was that,
Just to be clear, I didn't mean to be smarmy when I said that. You have to remember something about this project. You've been dealing with it for 18 months now.
oh,
This project started as a 24-acre proposal, and as it's gone through its various iterations, it's been reduced some 24%, or by 6.6 acres, down to the 18 that we now have. So that 4,000 wasn't something that's been sitting there for 18 months that we've been dealing with. You started and we started dealing with 24 acres, and slowly but surely, we reduced the project size to accommodate the stormwater features that Rowley and Price recommended. And it's more coincidence than anything else that we've gotten all the way to this point with 4,000 left.
I guess
I agree with you. 6 months ago, if I knew I was only going to have 4,000, I would have done exactly what you're observing.
The latest plan I have is dated September 29th, 2022. Mr. Rowley makes reference to a October 14th, 2022 plans and documentation. I believe the documentation is October 17th, has to be the Horsey Witten, but I don't know what the plan change was on October 14th. Is there a new set of plans?
Yeah, the Horsley Witten report was dated October 17th.
Yes, I have that.
On October 18th, we submitted a full binder to the town with revised plans, answers to all of Rowley's questions, and other information, which was provided to Mr. Pichette.
Yes,
But
and-
I understand the confusion.
Mr. Rowley did not reference that. He referenced an October 14th plan change, and they said that all the pages should have the same date on them, but that's,
I'm guessing that's probably small potatoes tonight.
yeah, I know, but the idea is, well, what is Mr. Rowley looking at? I don't have it. So I will go back and look at the original plan I had back in, June 2nd, 2021, to see how far into the wetlands we were, but my notes.
6 more acres.
6 more acres, okay. Now, I'm going to ask for public comment. I am going to add 2 minutes to each speaker, and I do not want anything that's been discussed before repeated. I do not want anything that is outside a wetland bylaw that is being covered or continued within the planning department. So is there anybody with that stipulation would like to speak to us for 2 minutes, not giving us anything that we haven't already heard or that will be covered in planning? Okay?
Penny Hayes, Farmers Lane. I had asked before if I could address PFAS. You agreed
And
that I could.
I think that's being covered in the planning.
Not to this extent, not to the water quality, and I think that's totally germane to this conversation. That's Dave's first reason for, of statement of the water quality compared to what currently exists.
But every time I look at a document, it says the solar panels don't, the solar panels do, whatever, but that to me is an issue with the planning department because they're going to be setting up testing sites, correct, for that PFAS?
The testing is proposed after the demolition of the forest and the consequences of that.
And do you see how conservation can prevent this project if there is a potential PFAS leaching
Yes, I
from the...
do, because it affects all of the wetland. The water, the components of the water quality affects all of the wetlands.
Are these solar panels any different from any other solar panel we've put in this town on all these other dozen projects?
We haven't examined any of the contents. We're just beginning to do that because this information is new. It burst on the scene this summer with the EPA now announcing these very small toxic limits.
Your concern is the PFAS runoff of these solar sites, even though the manufacturer has indicated there is nothing that would create that.
There is so much evidence since that very flimsy letter from Jinko Solar and DuPont, and I have that evidence here.
Can you time her for 2 minutes, please?
An additional 2 minutes?
Yeah, we've been back and forth. We'll give her the 2 minutes to make her statement on PFAS.
Okay.
Mass DEP's guidance after the information from EPA with tiny limits to PFAS. Mass DEP's solar guidance policy motto, this is a quote, motto policy, model certification, template approval, letter and SOP for staff state that public water systems shall use solar panels and solar sheets that do not contain PFAS. It is the public water system's responsibility as the manufacturer about PFAS for the solar panels being considered. Con Edison's certification on the 2 letters and also Mr. Shanahan's statement certifies that there are no PFAS in Jinko Tedlar by DuPont coated panels. However, polyvinyl fluoride, which is Tedlar, is a polymer PFAS. 2 kinds of PFAS, non-polymer and polymer. That is published in all toxicology charts as members of the PFAS family. Polymer fluoride as a polymer PFAS in the Handbook of Water Purity and Quality edition 2021 has stated a unique amphiphilic properties and stability of PFAS make them highly persistent, toxic, and environmentally and human bioaccumulative. They can act as endocrine disruptors and possible carcinogens. Polyvinyl fluoride has been in front and back sheets. Studies of back sheets of panels show yearly increase of panel failure in much less than the advertised 30 years. 8 to 10 years is often represented. 2 quotes among scientific studies. There are many scientific studies. Solar PB Power 21. The back sheets serve as a moisture barrier.
Thank you.
Could I have another minute? This is so important. This stuff is toxic, and if it leaches into this, everything changes.
Thank you. Next. Yes, Linda. No, Linda.
Hello, Linda Scharf in Onset, Mass. Thank you for talking about the wetlands. One of the things I've attended so many of these hearings, and I just keep hearing this, it's a buzzword at this point, wetlands. But then I started to look at what wetlands really are and how they interact with all of the other, the forests and the soils, things like that. So one of the phrases that I read was, wetlands are the kidneys of the earth. And one of the other pieces of research is that wetlands are special because they bury the carbon from decomposing plants before it can be released back into this atmosphere. The science is clear. Wetlands are the most effective carbon sinks on our planet. It's called blue carbon, and it's been found that the blue carbon sequesters more carbon from the atmosphere up to 5 times greater than terrestrial forests. So thank you for all of your work in protecting the kidneys of the earth.
Thank you. Next. Yes.
Kathy Papalardo, 87 Fearing Hill Road. I'm in a butter on the east side of the proposed project. I'm also president of the Wareham Land Trust, which holds the conservation restriction on the town-owned Fearing Hill Conservation Area. As holders of the CR, it's the responsibility of the Land Trust legally, both to the state and to the Internal Revenue Service, to see that the conservation value of the conservation area is upheld. The Horsley-Witten report and the oral statements mention the possible effects to the groundwater, private wells, erosion, and many other issues dealing mainly on the west side, where there are wetlands and neighbors with water issues. Due to the water issues on the west side, the design is to shunt the water from the west side to the east side, altering the flow of rainwater from the hill. Remember, this property is on the top of the hill, 90 feet above sea level, sloping down to residences and conserved land that's 30 to 40 feet below. Clear-cutting the top of the hill removes the trees that reduce the velocity of the stormwater runoff, which provides natural erosion control. How will this affect the conservation land? How will this affect the neighbors? They didn't look on the east. They called that vacant land. They looked on the west. Mr. Pichette's report details the numerous reasons for denying this project. I'm not going to repeat. What I will say is the purpose of the Wareham Wetland Protective Bylaw is to, quote, protect the wetlands, water resources, and adjoining land areas in Wareham by controlling the activities deemed by the Conservation Commission likely to have a significant or cumulative effect upon resource area values, including, but not limited to, public or private water supply, groundwater, flood control, or erosion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else? The woman in the back, I don't think I've heard from. She's putting her own timer on.
Okay, I'll let her run her timer. Mine's loud.
My name is Catherine Harrelson. I work for an organization called Save the Pine Barrens. We're located at 158 Center Hill Road in Plymouth, Massachusetts. I submitted my comments earlier today to the Conservation Commission. But I would like to say that growing up as a child, I was a third-generation Wareham summer resident, and I care about this town very much. Living in this town as a child was like a dream come true. Swimming in the clean water, running through the pine forest, and walking down the dirt roads had a huge impact on me growing up. And I want to make sure the same natural beauty I experienced in Wareham as a child is here for children for generations to come. I asked the Conservation Commission to deny the order of conditions for 91 and 101 Fearing Hill Road based on the town bylaw. As Mr. Pichette stated in his report, clear-cutting a large chunk of forest will also leave the exposed edge of the remaining forest more susceptible to wind damage. I'd like to argue that the Conservation Commission can deny the project based on the bylaw, because according to Section 1, the purpose of the bylaw is to protect the wetlands by controlling activities deemed to have significant or cumulative effect on storm damage prevention. Forests acts as natural buffers to storm damage due to hurricanes and tropical storms. According to the EPA, between 6 and 10 hurricanes and tropical storms landed in southeastern Massachusetts in the last century, and 11 and 20 struck the Atlantic coast of south and eastern Massachusetts in the last century. According to the EPA, according to NOAA, due to climate change, tropical cyclone rainfall rates are projected to increase along the Atlantic coast, and tropical cyclone intensities are expected to increase globally, resulting in a larger percentage increase in the destructive potential of storms. The Commission has the authority to deny projects based on unacceptable cumulative impacts to wetland resource areas and their protected interests. And I'd like to ask the town to, the Conservation Commission to deny the order of condition based on Mr. Pichette's report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nope, the gentleman with the mustache. I forgot your name. You've been before us before.
Eric Lentilla, 15 Squirrel Island Road, just across from Faring Hill. Alterations, what's going to happen? It's a key word to the wetlands and the watershed. Location, we're going to pick the worst location next to this area that's the lifeblood, the watershed and the river. We've heard experts from places. We've heard our own expert of 30 years experience that has lived here, knows the land, knows the water. Can't get any better advice than that.
Thank you. I saw a yes.
I'm Dan Malone, excuse me, I'm Dan Malone from 114 Faring Hill Road. What I didn't hear tonight was that it won't do this, and it won't do it. It shouldn't run off here, or it shouldn't run off there. Well, what if it does? Where are we then? Right now, I have well water in my, that I live on, and I have a sump pump. And I have a sump pump that's running 12 months a year. During the wet season, it's running every 5 minutes. What am I gonna do if these gentlemen were saying it shouldn't happen? I wanna hear it won't happen. I don't wanna hear that it shouldn't happen. Because if it shouldn't happen and it does, I have a cellar full of water. I only have one sump pump and I have a drainage system. That's the best I can do for my property. I can't take the chance of taking down all these trees and all that vegetation up there and just letting the water run off the hill and down into my front yard.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Something came up. If anybody goes down to Burgess Point Road, 5 acres of land were illegally cleared. We had the 2018 storm come through. Take a look at what happened to the Mass Audubon property and all the trees that came down because that 5 acres of forest was cleared illegally. So there is a major impact by clearing land on the trees around the land that's been cleared. Just go down Burgess Point Road and you'll see it. I saw, Nancy, you want to?
Thank you. Nancy McHale, 87 Faring Hill Road. Again, I live on the east side of this project, but that's not my question right this point. I have a couple of questions, points of clarification regarding the project that I would like to ask that's outside of my 2 minutes, if I may be. One of them is, Mr. Shanahan has stated that this is a 44-acre project. It's my understanding that what he has control of, which is the lease agreement on that, is less than the total of 44, so that saying that he's only going to clear 18 of 44 is not the same as saying clearing 18 of 25?
That's outside of us.
Okay. The thing that I believe really can impact the water on the east side and those bordering vegetative wetlands is the plan that diverts half of the water that is normally on that hill. The west side normally drains into the Sippacan, the east side drains into the Wee Wee Antic. The project design is to take a pipe, collect the water from the west side, drain it over on the east side, and dump it into the Faring Hill Conservation.
So it takes it away from Sippacan.
It does.
But that's, okay.
Okay, so Mr. Goddard stated tonight that the volume is going to be the same as it was coming off that east side. If you take all of the volume of rain from the west side, shove it around to the east side, and drop it into those basins, it's not going to be the same in any reasonable...
And that basin will run off into the Faring Hill.
Time.
Sorry, thank you. Seth, do you want to answer her question as to the volume that it would change because you're taking water from the west component of this hill and pushing it easterly? Would you like to comment on that as to no change in, or somebody? Because if we're being told there's no change in the flow, but we're taking water from one side of the hill, will it change what goes into Faring Hill Conservation Land?
Yes, Rich Tabazinski with Atlantic Design Engineers. The purpose of that was to divert, there was a drainage trench proposed to divert some runoff that presently is going to the west, to the east, but with the detention basins in place, that will mitigate that increase in flow. So the runoff towards the east is equal to or less than the runoff that's there under existing conditions. That's what the detention basins are doing. If we just diverted it without the detention basins, yes, there would be an increase towards those areas. But that the detention basin, both of them slow down the runoff and collect the water and release it at a rate equal to or less, actually a little bit less than the existing conditions now.
So how does it change the runoff that's going to the western component, the west side of this project? That goes into wetlands. What will change there?
That, again, there's a detention basin on that location. The amount of runoff going in that location, again, is controlled by the detention basin to meet or be less than pre-existing
So
conditions.
the water running east and the water running west will not change for what we have today?
The rates, yeah, I mean, there's slight differences, but they'll be less than existing.
A slight change in what we're having. Does that answer?
That defies logic that you're taking a larger volume of water. I understand that the basins are slowing it down so that the rate of runoff may or may not change. But the volume, the actual volume of water has to change if you're diverting it from one side of the mountain to the other.
Yeah, the rate will be controlled. There is an increase in volume going towards this massive wet.
So that answers my question. Water will be taken, no longer go to Sippacan, will be directed to Wee Wee Antic with the design that's there now.
In terms of a volume of runoff.
Yes, the volume of runoff.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay,
It does.
thank you.
So I just, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being the thin green line for the nature.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? I would make a recommendation that we close the hearing and collect our documentation and present our decision at the next meeting on November 16th. By closing the hearing, there will be no more discussions, no more emails, no more, we couldn't consider, if we close the hearing, we can't consider any other documentation or comments regarding this project.
The next meeting is within our 21 days?
Next meeting, the 16th, it was in our 21 days in order to provide a result, a Order of conditions, thank you, thank you.
Then I would move to close the project.
No hearing.
Close the hearing.
I have a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
The hearing is closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so we will go for 11:16. We will have the order of conditions. Thank you. So for anybody who, please, we have to continue our meeting.
This gentleman's here now.
Oh, yes, so I make a motion that we take Connor Cormier off untable. I make a motion to untable.
Second.
Second.
Second. I have a motion to untable.
Second.
I have a motion.
Oh, motion to untable.
Aye.
Motion to
So we're
untable.
on table. So who is here representing Connor Cormier?
Comrie.
Why do I get it wrong? And your name, please, for the record.
For the record, Joseph Hannon, professional engineer, Atlantic Coast Engineering.
Okay. It's going to take a while for some of the people to clear the room, so as Dave pulls the paperwork together. Okay.
Number 8. Number 8, okay. That's my number 8.
Well, it's only the first few innings.
That's right. That's right. Well said.
With 8. Oh, here's 8.
I am well aware that there is a baseball game going on. Okay. And I'm trying not to look at the score.
All right, what do we got?
Oh, this is a very tricky site.
It is a little tight.
Thank you. I'm set with copy.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Bichette will read to the project.
Yeah, so this project is at 33 Prospect Street in Onset, and this project involves reconstructing a retaining wall in the buffer zone to a coastal bank and within a coastal flood zone. A 73-foot wall is to be removed and replaced in the same general location as the existing wall. The retaining wall is on the property line between two lots, with one lot being approximately 10 feet higher in elevation than the adjoining property. The applicant on the low side of the wall will have to take place, the applicant is on the low side of the wall, but the work would have to take place on both properties, as material will have to be pulled back from the wall on the high side in order to allow for the wall to be reconstructed. The end of the wall close to the water meets the coastal bank, which is the seawall, and a patio area that is right at the water. The new wall would be made out of precast concrete blocks. We do have a DEP file number for this project. I think really the only questions that I had, I mean, I think the project needs to be done, but just the methodology of how it's going to actually be pulled off, because it's so tight up against that house. So maybe if you could just provide a little
There's
bit
your
of
challenge.
explanation on that.
Sure, so, again, Jed Hannon, Atlantic Coast Engineering. It's a challenging site. I did bring some pictures if any of the commission members want to see it. And thank you for, basically being in support of the project.
Yep.
From the perspective that the existing retaining wall is failing, and it does provide lateral support to the foundation that is to the abutters. The owner and I have spoken at length on the project, and we came up with, a cost-effective design, which are the, essentially the precast Lego blocks, to kind of use sort of a layman's term, and that was included in the filing. So they're basically precast concrete, they're filled with 3/4-inch stone, and there's filter fabric, so, it provides very much a porous material so that stormwater can recharge into the groundwater, versus the existing system, which is granite block, and it seems to, create a lot of movement from the freeze-thaw cycle and lack of stormwater, management capabilities. To answer your question, you know, given the tightness of the site to execute the project, you know, we're in full agreement that we need to select a very careful site contractor and retaining wall builder, definitely not a bull in the china shop type. So we're going to carefully evaluate potential contractors, obviously check references, make sure they've done projects of this size and scale before. Of course, set up erosion controls to minimize runoff and you know, silt concerns. So we did check, to speak, you know, specifically to the setback relative to the abutter. We did check the the face of top of wall relative to the abutter's foundation, and the abutter is in full support of the project. And that distance varies anywhere between 12 and 15 feet, and the wall varies anywhere from 3 to 10 feet. So there is enough safety setback. Usually the stress distribution is 1-to-1. So we feel as though we can execute the project safely without any impact to neighbors. It just has to be carefully monitored and executed in a safe manner as possible.
Do you envision having to truck material out and then bring it back because of how much might have to be sort of pulled away from that wall in order to get it all the way down to the base?
I can't speak specifically for the contractor that's going to do the work, but I would say that there's certainly going to be some of that, because I know at the top of the wall, just bring these up. Just kind of for the record, the top of the wall, you guys can kind of check through here, these bushes, which I'll speak to. So to answer your question in detail, the answer is yes, there will be some of that. There's existing shrubs, I don't know the name of the species, but right at the top of the wall. So those will need to be removed. Some of the soils will need to be removed that are on the upland side of the wall, so that the existing granite blocks can be removed, and then the proper sub-base can be established for the new retaining wall, and along with the backfill material for the new wall, which will partly be 3/4 inch stone and then porous gravel. So there will be some trucking out, but we'll try to make it as minimally invasive as possible.
And obviously, all the granite's going out.
Correct.
So all the work is going to have to be done from the neighbor's house. You can't get any equipment down those steep stairs into the backyard of the applicant.
So
Little ones, little equipment, but nothing substantial.
Understood, yes. So the owner applicant for this particular project spoke to the abutter. The abutter is in support of the project, realizing that there's potential
He
risks
could lose
to
his
both
side.
properties.
Yeah, he could lose his side
Exactly.
yard.
So they're going to work out an agreement for access use, and then full restoration to include looming and seeding, and I would suggest conditioning it as such as
Yeah.
well.
Those bushes are not a great bush anyway. I have more questions, but I'll go around. Kwame,
No questions, thank you.
Denise,
Do we need confirmation about the neighbor?
not us.
He tells us that it's okay.
That's not us.
Not
That would
us.
have to be probably planning. Or no, a building inspector, enforcement
Well,
officer.
yeah, I'm not sure if either one of those would be, I think in this kind of a scenario, it would be appropriate to include a condition that there be a letter from the neighbor, so we have it in the file. You know, if they're agreeable, it shouldn't be a big deal to get such a letter, and then at least we have it. So I think that's a
Yeah.
good condition to include in
Okay.
this type of a situation.
Michael,
No questions, thank you.
Carol,
No questions, thank you.
Nicole.
No questions, but could I see those pictures if they're different from the ones that you have?
I didn't get to see those yet.
Sorry.
If I go down the neighbor's property, he has a pretty sad-looking 8x8 wooden no, what's it? That's an 8x8 piece of wood, looks like his retaining wall. Then there's a gap, and then there's those ugly bushes. That will all have to be removed, correct, in order to get to the granite that you're going to take down. Any idea where the granite's going to go?
So this is the
Someplace off property.
Somewhere off property, and I would
Those are
I
nice
would
looking.
hope, you know, somebody should be able to get a decent credit for that, you know.
That's-
The
those
ones
are-
that are at least in good shape. I think
saying it doesn't go bad. I'm sure you'll break some, but,
Yeah.
I
Oh, I'm
mean,
sure
those are great pieces.
certainly has some value.
Those are great pieces of stone. Is there anybody in the audience who'd like to comment on this project? I am seeing none. Any other questions here? I mean, this is going to be tricky. So we're looking at an order of conditions with standard plus approval letter in the file from the neighbor approving the work on their property. Anything else?
So moved.
So that's the motion?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Did we close the hearing?
Oh, we didn't know we
Oh,
did.
thank you.
I move we close the
I'm
hearing.
sorry,
skipped one.
I'm sorry. We're
Skipped a whole
having
step.
cupcakes, brownies, and fudge
We need
after the
sugar.
meeting.
really
So
want to
I'm
get to our
trying to finish
chocolate.
the meeting so we can have a little party for Dave, so I apologize for, can I have a motion to close the hearing?
Move to close the hearing.
Second.
And a motion and a second to close the hearing, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, the hearing is closed now.
To accept the project with the inclusion of a letter from the neighbor that he approves the use of his property for this project.
Second.
That's the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. Thank you, and
Very much. Have a great evening.
find your contractor, but nothing gets started until you see the paperwork from Mr. Pichette.
Understood. And we'll work on getting that letter to you folks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we're almost done. You're almost done with your last meeting. Oh,
I don't mean to interrupt the meeting with David. You moving on to greener pastures?
I am, yes. Yes.
oh, you missed the announcement at the beginning.
I did, yeah.
Yes,
When's your last day?
Tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Conditions going to take a few months to,
We'll make sure it gets out in a timely fashion. All right,
good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
take care.
Okay, we have some certification of compliances.
Can I get another one of conditions before you leave?
Can we get it before you go?
Can you sign my papers?
Oh, I'm sorry. Carol.
You all set?
Yeah, we're all set.
Should we wait for Michael or no?
Well,
Compliance, right?
something to think about, we have one of our discussions, future meeting dates and holiday schedules, so we're going to be talking about that. So look at your calendar and think when you might like to have a break from meetings. But, okay, I heard that.
May through August.
Doesn't work
November
there.
3rd through,
January 1st to December 31st.
okay.
All right,
So the first certificate of compliance is for Mimi Demaro at 1 Blue Jay Terrace, and this project involved the construction of a garage at this location in the buffer zone to a coastal bank.
Excuse me 1 minute, we need to note that Mike stepped away
all
for the
right.
minutes.
Here he is.
Here he
He's
is.
back.
So he didn't step away far.
So that project has been completed according to the order of conditions, so I would recommend the issuance of the certificate of compliance for that project.
Someone say so moved.
So
Thank you.
moved.
Second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. We're approving this one.
I'd just like to say thank you, David.
Oh,
Same here.
Number of projects with the commission, and hopefully this will be our last. Good luck at the DEP.
Thank you.
you waited a long time for that.
See, we're
Oh, when will,
Mimi.
Mimi, when will the paperwork be ready?
It'll be ready probably
Maybe
by...
next Wednesday?
Yeah, by Wednesday.
Okay.
yeah.
There is. David's leaving.
He's leaving, there's a rush.
Thank you.
The next project was at 35 Crab Cove Terrace, supposed to be 35, not 3. This was for the reconstruction of a deck in the buffer zone to a coastal bank and partially on a coastal bank. If you recall, we asked them to move the deck further back from its original location, which they did do, so that project is also completed according to the order, so I would recommend the issuance of that certificate of compliance as well.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained.
The next one is down in Burgess Point area, 46 Winship Ave. This was for the construction of an addition to this home, along with several other features, including a pool house and so on and so forth. Again, that has all been completed according to the order of conditions, so I'd recommend that certificate as well.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye. You got it.
Opposed, abstained.
Do you want to do one?
The last time we're voting on anything with Dave.
Oh, what's going on here?
No, we have to vote on closing the meeting, so that's the last one.
Okay,
This last project was down at 18 Sias Point Road. This is actually a really old order that the owner just never got the certificate of compliance for. It was for a seawall reconstruction. This was back in probably the 80s. So this has been completed, and
what's the address? Because it's not on the agenda.
18, yeah, it is.
Sias.
18 Sias Point Road. Oh, you don't have the current agenda, that's why.
Oh, I have an old one. Okay, so there, I heard a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained?
Aye. Hey, we're done.
Sharon, I just want to make a quick comment.
Yeah.
Take away another
We're going to talk about future meeting dates. We're coming up against the holiday time. So
Yeah,
pull-
that was put on just in case there were some members who might know that they were going to be away, either around New Year's or something like that. I think the first meeting in January would be on the 4th, so it's really not like right next to New Year's, but some people,
Well, December, we have December 12/7, and we have 12/21.
right, so that could also be a conflict on the 21st.
Does anybody have an issue with Wednesday before Christmas?
Yeah.
So I would suggest that we do not have a 12/21 meeting. In January, we have a 1/4 meeting.
That would not be good.
That's a
either.
couple days after New Year's.
Yeah, that would not be good
It's
either.
close. It's real close.
Yeah.
Well, you,
Not be good either.
but if you
Dave's
did,
birthday.
you just realize if you did that, you'd be skipping 2 meetings in a
Oh,
row,
boy.
which would be difficult to catch up with, so.
I think the
We would not even
January
have an
one would be
agent.
fine, and
Yeah.
then maybe skip the one right before Christmas. I think that one people
Yeah.
have
So,
more trouble with.
We will not hold a meeting on December 21st. We will hold our next meeting on January 4th and then 18th.
And there's enough people who can make that if I can't be there.
Yes,
Yes.
because I have a feeling by that time, Jessica would have had 5 to 6, 6 to 7 meetings, which we normally do before we make a recommendation for moving up to a voting member. So we should very well be up to 7 people by December.
January 4th.
Where
Yeah.
do
Yep.
we fall for Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving
Yeah.
is our next meeting is November 16th. That's not an issue with Thanksgiving.
16th, and that's it for the month of November,
Yeah,
anyway.
because we only do just, we don't, you won't, that's right, the 1st and the 3rd, not the 5th. Okay, so that's it. So before we adjourn, Mr. Pichette would ask to comment.
Yes, I just wanted to thank the commission members for their efforts and everything you guys always do, and it's been a pleasure working with all of you. And, you know, I'm here doing what I do, but I'm getting paid. You guys are doing it for free, so you guys deserve a lot of credit for putting in your time and effort to protect the town's wetland resource area. So you guys deserve a lot of credit, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave.
So someone would take a motion to adjourn at 8:52?
Motion to adjourn at 8:52?
Second, all in favor? Aye.
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 As we start to bring out the goodies.